Thank you, Mrs. Zafri, and thank you everyone for still being with us for our third and final panel session. The topic is on PETRONAS Roadmap to Net Zero Carbon Emissions by 2050. The panelists for this session are Dr. Nasir bin Darman, Chief Technology Officer, Group Research and Technology, PETRONAS, Dr. Jason Mariyappan, Head New Energy, PETRONAS, Datin Sunita Rajakumar, Founder of Climate Governance Initiative Malaysia, and moderating the session. Please help me welcome Ms. Ping Manongdo, Relationships Manager, Eco Business. Over to you, Ping.
Thank you, Frida. EcoBusiness is Asia Pacific's leading media organization dedicated to sustainable development and responsible business. I'm pleased to be your moderator for the session, Roadmap to Net Zero Carbon Emissions. This session is brought to you by PETRONAS. I'm also pleased to be joined by my fellow speakers whom I'll be introducing very shortly. A quick reminder to those of us tuned in to please stand by for our Q&A segment at 4:45. Thank you for engaging with us. I'd now like to introduce our distinguished speakers for today's session. We have Dr. Datin Sunita Rajakumar, founder of Climate Governance Initiative Malaysia. Dr. Nasir B. Darman, Chief Technology Officer, Group Research and Technology, PETRONAS. And Dr. Jason Mariyappan, Head New Energy, PETRONAS. This session comes at an important time. PETRONAS just announced last month that it will be carbon neutral by 2050. This comes off the back of a very challenging outlook for the world coming out of a pandemic, but also a timely one as we are seeing net zero carbon targets not only being set by major energy players, but also by major economies in our region. Getting to zero, of course, is not a small feat. It requires immense efforts from leadership to transform organizations and countries through shifts in fundamentals and investments steered toward lighter carbon footprint. But we have been warned that the world only has 10 years to prevent any irreversible damage from climate change, and so urgent action is key. We are excited to be joined by our speakers who will shed light on how Malaysia's leading energy company will lead the transformation towards a net zero future. Let's begin with a warm-up introduction, and I'd like to call in the lady from our session for today, Sunita. Climate Governance Malaysia is a Malaysian chapter of the World Economic Forum's Climate Governance Initiative. For the benefit of the audience tuning in, tell us more about the mandate of the Climate Governance Initiative and your plans in driving the Malaysian chapter among senior leaders. Sunita?
Thank you, Ping. Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you to GCMY and, of course, PETRONAS for hosting the session. So in January last year, the World Economic Forum issued climate governance principles about how directors can be informed about managing the top financial risks arising from the climate emergency. And in May last year, we were launched by YB Yobian, the Minister for Climate Change at that point, and His Excellency Nick Bridge. We were the second chapter in the world and the first in Asia. And since then, over 20 country chapters have launched with this World Economic Forum initiative. We've organized over 40 events, all free of charge. Many attended not just by directors, but by management teams and civil society as well. So there's definitely a need in the market for content like this. We're starting a membership drive shortly. So the thinking behind this is that businesses are facing real physical risks and an evolving regulatory landscape. So there's growing urgency on the need of corporates to understand, assess, and disclose physical-related climate risks and opportunities. This means they need to take concrete steps to build up climate resilience. They have to adjust to new stakeholder expectations, and they need to meet the changing needs and demands of customers. So ensuring that companies are braced for these changes requires clear ownership and accountability, which needs to be mainstreamed throughout the organization, together with routine disclosure of material risks, whether physical, transition, or liability related. So that's it in a nutshell, Ping.
Thank you so much, Sunita. And we'll hear more from your work later. I'll turn to Dr. J at this time. Dr. J, tell us a bit more about new energy and the role that it plays in meeting this aspiration. In fact, in his keynote address, and Zafri talked about measuring and verifying Scope 1 and Scope 2 of the emissions as part of efforts to reduce emissions. How does renewable play into this, and what is your aspirations of net zero carbon emission for PETRONAS?
Thanks very much, Ping. I think at New Energy, so New Energy was formed last year with the formation of Gas and New Energy in PETRONAS. And the aspiration for that new energy business is to be a key contributor to the business going forward, protecting the company from volatile oil and gas prices, which we're seeing right now. But with the net zero carbon target, it can play a dual role. So firstly, across our operations, there is an opportunity to switch to renewables where possible. And we've started this in a number of ways across the businesses. We had a program called Solar Installation and Application of PETRONAS Rooftops and Assets Nationwide called Sinaran. This is where we're placing rooftop solar across our research facilities, across our petrol stations. We have a fabrication yard with Malaysia Marine and Heavy Engineering Holdings. And we've started installing at these various sites already. So I think an 8 megawatt plant is going in at MMHE. 7.3 megawatt plant is going in at UTP. We have a number of petrol stations with PDB. So this directly feeds into Scope 1 emissions. Then when we look at Scope 2 emissions, we're also developing renewable energy projects in both solar and wind for our customers and for countries and utilities outside of Malaysia. And these can contribute to the business through Scope 2 emissions, as well as through offsets where possible. So these are a couple of areas that we're working on. Obviously, there is also further opportunities with other fuel switching and using fuels like hydrogen, for example, as well as the one which is probably more easy in some sense, which is energy efficiency.
Wonderful. I look forward to elaborating on that further later. I turn to Dr. Nasir at this time. Can you please tell us, how is PETRONAS leveraging technology to achieve its net zero targets?
Thank you for the question. Being a CTO of the company, I would say that technology is a key for PETRONAS in achieving our net zero emission, net zero carbon emissions. Yeah, it is basically the heart of the whole initiative, and my role is to make sure that PETRONAS be able to operate very efficiently going to the future. Yeah, being oil and gas company, PETRONAS, like it or don't like it, we are basically operating in what I call a grey technology area. Grey technology area is something that we use oil and gas to produce energy or to produce our own product, right? Without any effort or any initiative to control the byproducts, the carbon emission and so on. That is what I call grey. The other part of technology is what I call blue. Blue is in the sense that it's same like grey, but we basically manage all the byproducts, the unwanted byproducts that we produce. In this case, we need to make sure that the methane emissions, the CO2 emissions to the environment is basically taken care. And the other one, the last one is grey. So it's green. Yeah, green is basically no zero, no carbon being used initially. So example of green is basically hydrogen, a green hydrogen, where we basically split the hydrogen and the oxygen atom of water to produce oxygen and hydrogen separately. So that hydrogen can be used to fuel a lot of machines and a lot of generator moving forward. In terms of blue technology, we are basically putting an effort to make sure that PETRONAS operation become environmental friendly moving forward. So we put up a lot of CCUS projects. If you are not familiar, allow me to say CCUS stands for carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So what we did is that we try to capture all the carbon that we produce. We basically transport them to a suitable site that we can basically store. Yeah, so that the environment is basically clean from carbon. Not only that, a little bit of carbon, we basically utilize it to produce a new product. We currently have a product that use CO2, carbon dioxide, together with our own recipe that produce cosmetic for the woman. Yeah, so that is something that we use to utilize carbon to come up with a new specialty chemicals from PETRONAS. And in the greens, we also to make sure that the carbon footprint of the whole PETRONAS operation becomes smaller and smaller. Yeah, we make our operation a lot more efficient, produce less carbon, and I need to make sure that when we calculate all the carbon numbers, we are basically moving toward net zero carbon by 2050. So that is how I arrange all the programs to suit PETRONAS' ambitions of becoming the first company in Asia, oil and gas company in Asia that declare net zero carbon by 2050.
Wow. Thank you so much for articulating that bold ambition and for sharing your thoughts on how technology, in fact, plays a crucial role in delivering this ambition to reality. I come now to Sunita. As we all have heard right now, for an energy company like PETRONAS to put out such a bold ambition with a set time frame, it is sending shockwaves across the region. How do you see PETRONAS' recent declaration of going net zero by 2050? And will we see similar commitments from other large Malaysian companies soon?
Absolutely. So I want to share two things. One, courage, and number two, carbon is global. So number one, courage. I want to remind us that on the 22nd of September, during United Nations General Assembly, the world's largest greenhouse gas emitter, China, unilaterally made an announcement of net carbon zero by 2060. This is a crucial signaling and leadership role of government. Now, every organization in China will be under pressure to develop a credible story of how it's getting to net zero, because that is now the stated policy of the president of the government. And PETRONAS has the same impact. It took a great deal of courage. Without waiting for alternate signals of leadership, PETRONAS has stepped up. This is leadership in action. The details are complex and it's going to need time to process. And I'll give you an example. Korea was the first East Asian country to set a net zero target earlier. They made an announcement earlier this year. On the basis of this mandate, they won an absolute majority in April. In July, they announced the new Green Deal. And only last month, on the 28th of October, they announced that they would be committing to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. And it has multiple impacts: financing of overseas coal projects, imports of coal from other countries. And so the devil is going to be in the details. And I think it's a great statement of ambition and courage from PETRONAS. The second thing I wanted to point out also is a reminder that carbon is global. We have a farmer in Peru who is currently suing RWE, which is the largest German utility and the second largest emitter in Europe, for damage caused by greenhouse gas emissions. And the courts have decided that it does not matter that RWE has no operations in Peru because they are aware that emissions are global. So the emphasis now is on accountability at a corporate level and personal responsibility of every director. There's no legal differentiation between an executive and a non-executive director. So carbon is global, while businesses think they operate within certain boundaries. So the conversation now is of accountability and responsibility, especially in the face of huge disruption and especially where the science and data has been available for decades. So it's great to see PETRONAS preempting this conversation and leading the way.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you so much. And to further elaborate on the specifics, as you very eloquently articulated, Sunita, the devil is in the details. We'd like to hear from Dr. Jason right now. We talk about the low carbon solutions and cleaner energy as something that PETRONAS is pushing for. Can you please elaborate for our audience this afternoon on the hydrogen market?
Thanks very much. So far, if I may, we've started in new energy on some different technologies. So firstly, solar and wind, which are very mature technologies. They also have significant capacity increases that are expected over the next 2 or 3 decades. And there still is quite a lot of scope for cost reduction and efficiency improvement. So this is a key area of our new energy growth. We're also looking at both of these technologies provide generation that's intermittent, only when the sun shines, only when the wind blows. So we're also looking at the area of energy storage to make sure that we can have good, clean, and reliable supplies of energy. And these would mostly feed into electricity use. And then the other one, which you mentioned, which is hydrogen, which is much more a new gas or fuel for us, and indeed for everybody, although there is a lot of publicity around it. It's another area which we've just set up a team within our gas and new energy business to explore hydrogen. As Dr. Nasir mentioned about grey, blue, and green, there are various shades of hydrogen. We are already a producer of hydrogen within our operations. We now want to look at how we produce more and how we produce it in ways that the customer would like to have. So in this form, the fuel going forward may be green hydrogen, and that's something we're looking at. As you may have noted, PETRONAS recently entered a MOU with Sarawak Energy Berhad to undergo a joint techno-commercial study of green hydrogen production and its value chain. We really think that the data and collaboration that we can derive from this partnership will really help us gain insights into the potential hydrogen supply chain in Asia.
Thank you very much for giving us some perspectives into that new investment segment of yours. I turn now to Dr. Nasir. What is the magnitude that PETRONAS is spending on technology to drive sustainability? Please share with us some specific examples of how this is working.
In terms of budget, I would say we have enough. In fact, more than enough. What is not enough is idea on how to solve problems. Yeah. In general, PETRONAS basically spent for the last 4 years in the order of several billion ringgits. Yeah, that is the magnitude that PETRONAS spent into technology, and about 90%, a little bit more than 90%, are basically focusing on sustainability, basically focusing on how to make sure PETRONAS achieve net zero carbon emissions, our own emissions. So just like Jay mentioned, that we are focusing very, very much into all the 3 drivers, all the grey technology, all the blue, and also green technology. And I would like to announce that we are commissioning our own electrolyzer, where we believe is the best in the world, that can very efficiently produce hydrogen from our own system. Yeah. So we are currently installing in our research center in Bangi. So that is one example. We're also doing a little bit more fancier. You know, the relationship between Jay and me is very unique. Yeah. If you look at Jay, is a guy that generate money from existing business that we can do, right? Mm-hmm. The subject only comes to me when we need a lot more research to make sure that Jay can generate money. So my job is basically something that to make sure Jay have an opportunity to open up his window and door to a new business model. So wind turbine, for example, in Malaysia somehow reside near the equator, and when we are based in the equator, the wind speed is very, 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 very low. Yeah, we are not just like North Sea where you put a wind turbine it will turn around and produce power. So my team are basically looking up the whole design of wind turbine for low wind speed environment. So we need to localize all the ideas that we have, because if we just buy the normal wind turbine and put it in Malaysian environment, the blade will not turn.
Mm-hmm.
and it's just a waste of money. So I need to custom a little bit to make sure that Petronas have the best solution for our own environment. So that is all the budget that you asked about being spent to make sure we have a total solutions and a very efficient technology solution for J to make a lot more money for Petronas and to the nation.
You sound like you have a very challenging job, Dr. Nasir, of all the best.
I totally like it. I enjoy the challenge.
Wonderful to hear. All right, so we already have some questions coming in from the audience, but just before I turn to Dr. J for these questions from our audience members, I have one last question for Sunita here. I wanted to ask, so this signal from Petronas and even from Bursa Malaysia is really giving our board governance a new scope through which to see how to manage climate risks and opportunities. Can you give us some examples of what boards need to consider when assessing climate risks and opportunities in this perspective?
Okay, so here again, I just want to share 2 points. Ensure that you're aligned with values and ensure that you're aligning executive compensation with climate strategy. So values, I just want to share a very short story. Earlier this month, on the 3rd of November, Tuesday, Shell ran a climate poll on Twitter, and this backfired spectacularly. It was a very straightforward climate poll. What are you willing to do to help reduce emissions? Whether you want to offset your emissions, whether you want to stop flying, whether you want to buy electric vehicles. This attracted 199 votes. So far, so good. Very straightforward. Unfortunately, this was picked up by other influencers. And we had people, for example, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying, I'm willing to hold you accountable for lying about climate change for 30 years when you secretly knew the entire time that fossil fuel emissions would destroy our planet. And this was liked 350,000 times. This fossil fuel company only has 500,000 followers. So I think it's essential that from the board downwards, that the tone from the top is alignment with your values. So if you're stating something throughout the organization, be aligned with your values. And the next one is aligning executive compensation with climate strategy. This arises for many reasons. It's crucial because there's a large difference between C-suite compensation and the average worker pay, and between tenure between directors who stay on, let's say, for 9 years. The C-suite tenure might be shorter than that, but climate risks are currently being described in decades. This is what is known as the tragedy of the horizon. But you do have prudential regulators, central banks, who are moving very quickly to reduce systemic risk to the financial system. And even our own governor is recognizing that climate change is an existential threat to humanity. Mm-hmm. Governments are going to be forced to act. This is what is known as the inevitable policy response. 126 governments are already committed to net zero. Capital markets pull risk forward. And so if businesses are not ready, and if executive compensation is not aligned to climate targets, businesses will be open to this.
Thank you very much. Very well said. Thank you, Sunita. Now I turn to questions from our audience, and I think Dr. J, this is one that is for you. What is the current demand for hydrogen currently in Asia?
Now that's a very good question. I think you asked before about the market itself, and if you enter hydrogen into Google, you'll see a lot of news, a lot of partnerships being formed, a lot of money being spent on the development of technology. Mm-hmm. Is there a lot of consumers of hydrogen today, other than the ones that have been consuming hydrogen in industry before? Is there a lot of new customers? I don't think we see it today, but there are a lot of customers who are looking at that as a solution for their future needs. particularly when they're looking at their net carbon emissions targets. So it's I think it's a very small market today in terms of customer. But when we look at all of the options going forward, this is an option that can act as a replacement for various fuels, various opportunities, and therefore it has good potential if it can be produced cheaply, cleanly, and safely.
Thank you very much. And another question here, and I think, Sunita, this is best answered by you. Some governments or economies have taken to announce net zero carbon. How far do you think Malaysia is towards announcing the same?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question because it's top on the agenda. So many countries have already committed to this. And not only that, you have over 100 countries in the world that have some form of carbon pricing already. So at Climate Governance Malaysia, we are supporting the CEO Action Network, which is a grouping of 41 companies chaired by Tengku Taufik at PETRONAS. We are having a multi-ministerial series of roundtable conversations on setting climate ambition, including net carbon zero targets. We're hoping that this can be kicked off by next month because we understand that we want an all-of-government approach and an all-of-society approach as well. Everybody needs to step up and be part of this conversation. I referred to the inevitable policy response just now. Governments might be late to the table, but when they do arrive, they have a huge arsenal of policy levers that they can do. The Korean government, with 2 days' notice, closed down a quarter of coal power plants. And so industry would rather be part of this conversation and ensure that we're having a smooth transition rather than an abrupt transition which have characteristics of falling off a cliff. So we are in conversation right now and the government is open to discussing this.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for pointing out that this is an ongoing conversation. And in fact, it should lead to collective action. How does, and this question is either for Dr. Nasir or for Dr. J, how do you take this lead to create an impetus for getting everyone on board?
Let me try to answer that.
Please, thank you.
How PETRONAS see net zero carbon emissions is a license for us to operate. Yeah, there is no question: do we have options or not? And we must walk the talk to achieve what we say. Yeah. So license to operate is to become clean. So we have to align our activities. We have to align our actions to that. And because of that, and the technology part basically comes to me. And I need to make sure that we do that. We are not trying to say that we are good at everything, or we try to develop our own technology for everything. But for specific case, and one of the things that I'm talking over here is sustainability and net zero carbon. We are putting a lot of effort and money and time, basically focusing on that, and that is how we rally the whole team in technology, for example, to be aligned with PETRONAS. And recently, PETRONAS not only have that ambition to become net zero carbon, we also change our mission and vision statement to a statement of purpose. And our statement of purpose now is basically to become a progressive energy and solution partner, enriching life for sustainable future, right? So start from the top, from the board, from the management committee, to the middle management, and to the bottom. We are basically trying to narrate a storylines that everybody believes PETRONAS need to be net zero carbon going to the future. And without having that, it might destroy our own self. So it is not an option for us to choose. It's a destiny that we want to go.
Wow, that is very eloquently said. It aligns very well with what Sunita just mentioned, that we have to align the value from the board level down to our supply chain. Our chat box is very hot with questions right now. And anybody can please pick on this question. In achieving net zero, how will PETRONAS ensure its supply chain is on the same journey? Would this entail having a criteria on sustainability when selecting contractors for upskilling contractors? This is really a very good question on transition as well, ensuring that jobs are not displaced, especially during the time of the pandemic. Maybe I'll start with Dr. J on that, and Sunita can also give her take on this.
Thanks, Ping. I think on this question, it is when all companies are looking at their net zero carbon target, including PETRONAS, as we've identified our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, that's where our concentration will be. Of course, you want to encourage your partners, your vendors, to go on this journey with you, so that we're all aligned. And that's very much what we want to do in Malaysia, as well as when we work on projects and collaboration abroad. So I think that's how we look at it. Across all of the operations that we do, wherever we have emissions that are in the supply chain, we want to help reduce those in one way or another. Now, if that can be through the vendors that we provide, or it's through the technology that Dr. Nasir is going to help provide us, they are solutions that we can call on. But I really would stress this idea that for us to get to net carbon zero, it really requires collaboration and partnership, and we need everybody in that.
Yeah.
You.
I agree completely with that, because some of the world's largest businesses and banks have already committed to net zero on a Scope 3 basis. And not only that, but the network of central banks and supervisory regulators, which is the NGFS, which Bank Negara is a member of, it now has 75 members and 13 observers, and these account for jurisdictions that represent over 2/3 of global emissions. So when you have such a tsunami demanding that you decarbonize your operations, I think it's inevitable, and PETRONAS would be doing their supply chain a favor by helping them along this journey so that they are prepared. Because Goldman Sachs recently came out with a report saying that the implied price of carbon is $80 per metric ton. There's not very many businesses that can pivot away from that. So I think it's great if PETRONAS reaches a hand out to the supply chain and helps them along this journey.
Wow, something to look forward to, absolutely. Thank you, Sunita. I believe we have time for only 2 questions. And this one here is asking, our audience is asking, looking at how industries have been shaken and horizons disappearing, will PETRONAS be venturing outside of energy? Maybe I could throw these question to Dr. Nasir.
Okay. What I'm trying to say over here is that it's really happening. It is not if, but we are sure will. You know, like I'm telling you, basically having developing a technology to basically utilize CO2 to produce cosmetic. Right. So either PETRONAS to go into cosmetic or not, something for us to decide. Yes, we start basically on how to become greener, on how to become net zero carbon. But the products that we produce is basically going beyond oil and gas. Another example that I'm putting out is a self-healing material. You know, we are basically developing a self-healing material. This is magic and sounds very futuristic, but it is not. We already have it in our catalogs right now. It's basically a material that when it sees some corrosions or split of atoms, they can talk to each other and basically combine it back and heal itself. We basically think on how to do this at our platform, so that we use less chemicals to combat the corrosion and everything. But just imagine if PETRONAS go into OEM of car manufacturer, right? All the body of the car using self-healing material, where we do not need to repaint and everything. So naturally, when we do this effort of net zero carbon, to a certain extent, we need to go beyond oil and gas. That is how I put the situation.
Wonderful, thank you. And Sunita, you also wanted to share your perspective.
So, will Petronas be venturing beyond energy? Obviously, I can't speak on behalf of Petronas, but businesses all around the world are already recognizing that changing consumer preferences and new climate policies are creating what could be the greatest commercial opportunity of our time. Given that climate change is an existential risk, it follows that those companies that are part of the solution to the climate crisis are going to create enormous value. So it has been called the opportunity of a lifetime. So companies like Petronas that are making this investment in the future, as we just heard, billions over the last few years with over 90% in sustainability, whether it's resulting in an energy paradigm shift or entirely new ventures based on its original DNA, this sort of disclosure of climate strategy and in transition plans will only reveal the leaders and the laggards in the next crucial years. As we are seeing now with COVID-19, having access to open and accurate data during a crisis is crucial to managing multiple stakeholders and earning the confidence and respect of society. So this is all part of this constant iterative feedback loop of refining and evaluating.
All right, thank you very much. I guess I'm coming down to my last question, and every one of us in the panel can share thoughts about this. So our business, or Petronas business, for example, perhaps only would matter if eventually it changes positively the impacts of the lives of people, on the lives of people. So, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen that particularly the pandemic has hit Southeast Asia's MSMEs, the micro, small, medium enterprises. So question from the audience here, how will this new shift in Petronas business direction impact entrepreneurship in Malaysia? And what is your advice to entrepreneurs in Malaysia towards net zero carbon emission? Perhaps I could start with Dr. J.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's a very good question. The last few months have been difficult for a lot of people, a lot of SMEs, and a lot of individuals. And I think there have been some solutions that have come up during this time as well, which have helped sustain some of these businesses, but others have really suffered. I think in our net zero carbon emissions target, actually, it's not just emissions. So it is also tied up with ensuring that we have a positive social impact. And that is a very important component of what we do. And it's something that we will be measuring. We will be making sure that it's incorporated into what we do. We try to do that already, but now we are taking it one step further with the net zero carbon target itself. So I think that's something that we're very aware of and trying to do some action on. As you know, in Malaysia, the company has had a lot of input into developing industry within Malaysia, including SMEs. I'm just giving a very small example because I'm in the new energy part here. We made a small investment in a company called Sols Energy, which is a company that provides residential solar solutions. And the way they do this is quite innovative. They get electrical installers from around the country. They retrain them, and some of that retraining had to be done online during this COVID-19 situation. So they retrain them, and then they will look after installations of solar in the areas that they are operating in. And this network that they have has proved very resilient in these times because they're able to increase and roll out the installation of solar. And when you have solar in residential today, you really are reducing your electricity bills, reducing what is sometimes a heavy load because we're spending more time at home. So I think this is just in a small way one of the examples of what we're doing.
Thank you very much, Dr. J. We have time for a quick wrap up. Coming from that question, I guess I'll start with Dr. Nasir and then we'll wrap up with Sunita.
Okay. I totally agree with what Dr. J mentioned about how COVID accelerate certain things and delaying certain things. For technology and Petronas, what I see is that yes, the demand for oil and gas is become lower. The budget is lower. But what I see is that the accelerations of digital technology. Yeah. Basically, during this COVID, I would say my team has come up with wonderful things of drone, for example. So we are basically putting up drones to deliver things from platform to platform in offshore. Last time, to deliver a food, for example, a lunch pack from a guy that basically doing some job in unmanned platform, we need to start the boat, load everything, send the food, and we can now do that within 2 minutes. We fly drone from one platform to one platform and supply all the food to that platform. So we try, and not having to start the engine of the boat is one of the small effort that makes the world greener. Yeah, because the boat is basically using diesel to fuel it up. So what I see, the advancement, the accelerations of digital technology is coming, and that basically simplify a lot of works that we normally do differently when COVID is not coming. So things are changing. To a certain extent, is a good thing. Not everything is bad. To a certain extent, it's a good thing, and we are riding that storm as good as we can.
Very well said. Sunita, your take.
Thank you, Ping. My closing remarks. We need to make the journey of a multi-decade transition that's deeply complicated, and we are therefore entering the decisive decade of humanity. The key insight that we know today, scientifically, whether or not we succeed in delivering Paris, is no longer just about decarbonizing the world's energy system. It is equally important to maintain our biodiversity, transform the world's food system, and maintain the carbon sinks that we have in our natural ecosystems. We cannot have a successful business on a dead planet. So we know that environmental sustainability and commercial sustainability are one and the same thing. So we need to look for the lowest coefficient of friction pathway to getting to where we want. And for this transition, which must be the most significant transformation in economic history, we need an all of government and all of society approach for us to manage the smooth transition and be more than aligned to Paris.
Wise words. Well, folks, that's all we have time for. Thank you once again to Dr. J, Dr. Nasir, and Sunita for sharing this wisdom to us today, and for Petronas for sponsoring this segment. I thank you so much for tuning in and for your questions, and I turn over the time now to Frida. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ping, and to all our panelists. I think what really resonated with me is we can't do anything on a dead planet. So we'll be taking a short 5-minute comfort break as we conclude today's session. So I'll see you in 5 minutes.